Disclaimer: all the story and images/graphics used in the video belong to their respective owners. I or this channel do not claim any rights over them, all credits to the respected owner. Chapter 91, Poor Service. Jack woke up the following day just like before. This time, he found that Denali had already woken up and was busy on the laptop. She was typing, and when Jack looked at it, he found that she was busy organizing some of the documents. There was Grace's information, and the others had also been well arranged in the laptop. The way that the documents had been organized was in such a way that he could find anything that was stored inside there easily. The moment that she saw him, she stood up and greeted him. Jack nodded before shifting his gaze back to the laptop. Currently, she was organizing all the information about the Brightway Medical Research Center. "Master, all I need right now is the money. I have already negotiated the price with the shareholders of Brightway Medical Research Center, and they have agreed to sell their shares," Denali said after she finished organizing the files. Jack was surprised at how efficient she was when doing things. It seemed that the servant that the system had given him was definitely top-notch. And, now that this part was done for, Jack decided that it would be good if he could upgrade the card that was in his hands. Then, he could ask for a privilege where his two cards could be used on the same account. He would remain with one and let Denali have the other. In this way, she could carry out the business deals without having to worry about anything. But still, he needed to get her a car. And so, the duo got out of the suite after they were well dressed. Although it was well dressing, Jack was still wearing his normal casual clothes. On the other hand, Denali was wearing the same official business suit. After getting out of the suit, he happened to see that Wendy was looking at his door with a hint of hesitation on her face. The moment that she saw him coming out, she was surprised. But, when she saw Denali coming right out after him, her heart skipped a beat. The previous night, Angie had told her that Jack had gotten a woman into his room. But, she didn't want to believe it. As such, she decided to come here this morning to confirm her doubts. But in the end, she was hesitant to enter considering that it was only 8 in the morning. She didn't know if she could be considered to be disturbing him by going there in the morning where she could be seen as a troublesome fly. But, when she saw that there was a beauty that was following Jack out of the suite, she really wanted to run forward and beat her up. But, she was forced to stop herself from doing that after considering the fact that Jack wasn't familiar with her. What's more, the lady was indeed beautiful than her, and her temperament was that of a cold CEO boss lady. Her aura was amazing and at the same time, deterring. When she saw that Jack was about to walk past her, Wendy blocked his path and tried to maintain her calm and greeted him, "Morning, Jack." Although Jack had told her that she had to forget about the engagement, that didn't imply that the two of them were enemies. So, he greeted her back. "Good morning." Then after that, since there was nothing to talk about with her, he decided to go on with his plans. But who would have known that Wendy had no intention of getting out of his way? Instead, she asked, "If you don't mind, may I ask who that lady behind you is?" Jack wasn't expecting this question. But all the same, he thought that it was to be expected since she still held on to the issue of the both of them being engaged. But, what did who he was with have to do with her? That wasn't something that Jack thought that he had to tell her, considering that he didn't even know who she was. "Am I supposed to tell you about who is around me? I don't think that I'm familiar with you to that level, right?" When she heard this, Wendy remembered that Jack seemed not to care that his father had already agreed to the engagement between the two of them. But, Jack himself wasn't to blame, as it was indeed true that he didn't know her. In this situation, there was no way that he would tell her anything just because she asked. With that said, Jack got past her and left with Denali. Ahem, Wendy failed to react at this moment. She didn't know what to say and could only blurt out, "But we're engaged." Her voice was low, but with Jack's senses, he could hear her well. He looked at her and said, "Miss, I think you should give up on this idea as early as possible. Otherwise, it's going to hurt you later. You should know that I don't know you. I'm no longer a member of Alfonso family, and I don't acknowledge the engagement that was made. So, better give up." And with that, Jack left with Denali following closely behind. He shook his head as he thought about how this lady was so relentless about the so-called engagement. He himself didn't approve it. So, to him, he was still single and ready to mingle. But he wasn't ready to have someone deciding for him who to mingle with. That was a decision that only his mother could get involved into. But now that she wasn't there, then nobody was qualified to interfere with his personal life. I won't give up. I'll make sure that you will love me, just like how I love you, Wendy said with determination. You can try, but you won't succeed. Jack's voice reached her, making her agitated. After getting out of the hotel, Jack drove the McLaren P1 to the automobile that he'd bought it from. Although Denali wanted to drive him, Jack refused. How could he be driven in a sports car? He owned it and he would definitely drive it by himself. There, he bought her a Porsche 918 Spyder. It cost him a total of $15,600,000, the rounded up price plus the service fee. After leaving with the Porsche 918 Spyder that was driven by Denali, they headed towards Flyers Bank Venture City branch. This time, he was going to upgrade the car to the maximum level that it could be upgraded, and if possible, he wanted it to be allowed to operate in any bank. Not long after, they arrived in front of the bank. Just like in Inchoate cities, the branch here was located in a building that had 12 floors. Jack simply shook his head at how these people maintained their image. Just like the one in Inchoate City, this bank was filled with people. Jack ignored the lower floor and headed to the topmost floor where the manager of the branch was. After leaving the elevator, he found that the layout of the office here was just the same as the one that was in Inchoate City. But it was just that it seemed that the bank here was busy, as he found that there were a few people already waiting. Jack took a seat while Denali went forward to the secretary and told her about what Jack wanted to do. The secretary was also a lady, but she seemed to be in her 30s. She nodded her head and instructed that they had to wait for a while. But after a whole half an hour, Jack frowned as he saw that there was no movement here. The door that led to the manager's office was still closed and there was nobody going in, nor was there a person that was coming out. Jack had an appointment at around 10 with Tracy. But it seemed that these guys wanted to keep him waiting, as even the secretary hadn't budged at all. She was just busy with whatever she was doing. He wasn't the only one that was frowning at this moment, as the others that were waiting alongside him also had impatient looks on their faces. But for some strange reason, none of them dared to speak a word of complaint. This puzzled Jack a lot. But all the same, he wasn't interested in waiting any longer. He looked at Denali, who was seated next to him. Understanding his meaning, she took a step forward and asked the secretary, "Excuse me, how long are we supposed to wait?" The secretary seemed irritated as she was disturbed. It turned out that she was playing a game at this moment. And Denali calling her had distracted her for a moment and led her to lose the game that she was playing. Can't you be patient like the others? If you're not patient enough, you can simply leave and come back another time. The secretary replied with contempt in her voice. When Jack, who was still seated in the lobby area, heard her, the frown on his face deepened further. He wondered why the service here was so poor and that even the secretary could talk to the clients anyhow she wanted. Shaking his head, Jack called Denali, who was just about to retort. He handed her the laptop and whispered to her on what to do. Denali nodded and she began typing on the laptop. And not long later, she hacked into the bank's security system and found the footage of the day. Jack watched the video that had no audio in fast mode. From the video, he could see that the manager, who was someone with a beer belly, had come in the morning and entered the office. Around 20 minutes after he entered the office, a lady came and went in as well. But, from the time that the two entered till this moment, it had already been over an hour and there seemed to be no movements at all. Jack got onto his feet and headed towards the door that led into the manager's office. Upon seeing his movements, the secretary shouted, "What do you think you're doing? You better get back and wait and not cause trouble here. Otherwise, I'm going to call the security to throw you out of here." Jack ignored her and stretched his hand towards the doorknob. The secretary got agitated the moment that she saw this and rushed forward to stop him. But Denali held her in place, not allowing her to disturb Jack in the least. Click. The door opened and Jack looked inside the office only to be met by a scene of two people who were busy tidying up their clothes. Chapter 92, Killed within 5 minutes. It seemed that the two inside hadn't expected that there was someone who would enter the office when they were busy. Furthermore, from the looks of it, had Jack come in 5 minutes earlier, he would surely have met another different scene from the one that he was seeing now. The two frowned as they looked towards the door. The beer belly had a dark expression on his face as he looked at Jack and roared, "What the F***ck do you think you're doing here, brat? Do you think that this is your house where you can simply enter when you like?" On the other hand, the lady lowered her head in shame. She was frightened that Jack would expose what had just happened here. All the same, she was the one that was going to suffer the most as long as information about what had happened here today was leaked. Jack wasn't stupid and obviously knew what had just happened between the two of them. Of course, if this was any other time, he would surely have minded his own business as this didn't concern him. But they decided to do their business when he was busy waiting for them. This meant that they were involving him in their business by making him waste more than 30 minutes while waiting. He completely ignored the shout and turned to look at the secretary and asked, "Were you seriously making me wait all this while just because these two were doing something that doesn't relate to the place that they are in?" The secretary was already pale at the moment. She had been instructed that nobody was allowed to enter the office not unless the manager himself allowed it. But she had never foreseen the situation that had just happened now. She didn't care about how the manager was going to deal with Jack. What she cared about the most was the fact that the manager was going to deal with her and this won't end well with her. She was trying to break free from Denali's grasp, but no matter how she tried, she couldn't escape from Denali. Furthermore, Denali didn't seem to be holding a person who was struggling, but more like she was holding an obedient little child. Being ignored by Jack obviously didn't sit that well with the potbelly. So, after making sure that his clothes were in place, he strode haughtily towards Jack, as if he was going to hit him in the next moment. Denali noticed this and moved forward, pulling the helpless secretary with her and blocked Potbelly's path. "TCH, get out of my way right now. I don't have time to deal with you at this moment. I want to deal with that brat that dared to barge into my office without my permission." The potbelly shouted at Denali, stretching his fat hand to push her aside. "Do you think you're qualified to deal with my boss?" Denali asked coldly. And the moment that the hand reached her, she grabbed it with her free hand and twisted it. "Arg!" A scream echoed on the whole floor as the potbelly was forced onto his knees. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free from Denali's grasp and continued screaming in pain. Denali was of course a smart person. She had entered the office where the cameras couldn't get the footage. And as she twisted his arm, she made sure that she didn't make him suffer any big injury that was too obvious. With her level of combat skills, she could control her body so well. So, the pain that the potbelly was suffering was only from the overly stretching of the joints and not the dislocation of the arm. The ones that were observing from the side were surprised that Denali, who looked like a normal little lady, could subdue the potbelly who was almost as twice as her in size and he was a man. They then shifted their gaze towards Jack, who was the lady's boss. They wondered what his background was for him to have such a powerful bodyguard. That's right, they thought that Denali was Jack's bodyguard. Had they known that Jack himself was even stronger than Denali, they surely wouldn't be just surprised. The reaction would have been bigger. "Let go of me, you TCH. Do you know who I am? I'll make sure that you pay for this Gria, arg." His threats were forced to stop when Denali suddenly increased the pressure that she was putting on him, increasing the pain that he was suffering. At this moment, Jack stepped forward and looked at Potbelly, who was now soaked in even more sweat. He gazed at him for a moment before asking, "Do you know what mistake you made today?" "What mistake are you talking about?" "I swear that I'll make you pee, arg." The potbelly was trying to throw threats again but was forced to stop by the sharp pain that assaulted him. Jack looked at Denali and nodded his head. In response, Denali let go of the potbelly, who then laid on the floor as his clothes continued to be soaked in his sweat. The pain that he'd experienced today made him sweat like this, One might even think that he'd just run a 10 kilometers marathon. Upon being released, he still didn't dare to make a sound, as he knew that if he dared to do that, he would surely have to experience the pain once again. Upon seeing that he was no longer making threats or shouting, Jack nodded in satisfaction. Then, he looked at the lady that was in the office with Potbelly. Although she wasn't a beauty at the same level as Denali or Celine, she could still be rated at 86. He shook his head and focused on Potbelly, who was now seated on the floor, no caring about his reputation at this moment. "You surely know how to play, huh? You came in here at 7 in the morning. Till now, it's already close to 9, you were still busy, ignoring us even though we have our own schedules for the day," Jack stated. Jack's words surprised not only Potbelly, but even the secretary, as they wondered how Jack had known at what time he'd come to work. Could he have been stalking him? But that didn't make any sense. After all, why would Jack stalk him? Another thing to note was that today was the first time that he'd come at 7, so it wasn't his routine that a person could easily get after observing his movements for a while. In the end, Potbelly thought that Jack saw him coming in the office today at that time. Otherwise, how could he know the exact time that he'd arrived? "I was here to upgrade this card to the one of the highest level, but it seems that you don't seem to care about the bank's clients. I wonder how the higher-ups of the bank will think when they know about this incident." Jack's voice wasn't loud, but it reached Potbelly's ears. As he heard what Jack was saying, he forgot about the pain that he'd suffered and hurriedly got to his feet. He then looked at Jack and said, "Do you know who my father is?" "My father is one of the shareholders of the Flyers Bank. Do you think you can do anything to me by telling the higher-ups of the bank? Just you wait, I'm going to freeze all your accounts with our bank." As he said these words, all the fear on his face had already disappeared, and what remained was arrogance without bounds. "Oh, is that so? I wonder how you can freeze my account when you don't have any information about me." Jack smiled coldly as he looked at Potbelly. Potbelly. Potbelly had suddenly realized that he hadn't gotten any information from Jack, and there was no way that he could freeze his account. He looked at Jack and demanded, "Hand over all the information about your accounts so that I can freeze it. I want to see what you'll do when you can't use the money in your account." Jack and the others couldn't help but doubt their ears. Was this guy an idiot? Who would give his bank information all so that it could be frozen? They wondered how this person could reach this position. "You sure live to your reputation of being foolish. But I'll entertain your foolishness to see how you're going to freeze my account." Jack said these words before handing over the black gold card. The ones that were watching the show thought that Jack was joking. But when they saw that he really handed over the card, they didn't know what to say. And again, seeing that Jack had a black gold card, they couldn't help but admire him. The black gold card was something that those with a deposit of 1 billion had. In other words, Jack had a deposit of at least 1 billion in his account at that moment. How could they not be surprised by this? Smugly, Potbelly received the card while thinking to himself, "Humph, you're trying to play tough with me here? See how easily you got scared when you heard that my father was one of the shareholders of the bank. Now, I'll just freeze your account." As the Potbelly went behind his computer to try freezing Jack's account, Jack looked at Denali and said, "5 minutes. "Yes, boss." Denali replied before releasing the secretary that was in her grasp. Then, she went out and took Jack's laptop and began typing. As for the ones that were observing the scene, none of them knew what Jack implied by 5 minutes. Anyway, they were only waiting to see how Jack's account was going to be frozen. About 5 minutes later, Potbelly, who was busy trying to freeze Jack's account, couldn't help but shout in disbelief. "What? How could he not shout like that, considering that Jack's account currently had over 100 billion? If this was just the 1 billion or 5, he would have been able to freeze the account, although it would have taken some effort for him to achieve that. But, freezing the account of such a big client, not even his father would dare to do that. His father wasn't someone big, he only owned 2% of the shares of the bank, which was equivalent to about 10 billion. Although that wasn't all that his father owned, but all the same, that was counting assets. But Jack here had liquid cash. Just how worth were his assets? no matter how he thought about it, he found that his father was lacking. He broke out in cold sweat, thinking about how he'd made this person wait for him for a whole half an hour when he was busy with something that wasn't allowed in the industry or the public. Just at this moment, Denali walked into the office and said, "Boss, I'm done." Jack nodded. It was good that she was good at managing the time. As for the secretary and the others that had been waiting for the show, they didn't know what to say when suddenly, Potbelly, who was arrogant a moment ago, went pale. Before they could get any explanation about what was going on, Potbelly's phone rang. Looking at the caller, he found that it was his father who was calling. After hesitating for a moment, he received the call. And a moment later, he was like a balloon as he deflated and sat on his seat listlessly. He knew that he was done for. Now, he understood that the 5 minutes weren't the time that he'd been given to freeze the account, it was the time given for his end to come. He had been killed in just 5 minutes. Chapter 93, Tracy. Jack looked at Potbelly, who was sitting there listlessly, and said, "It seems that you can't lock my account, right? In that case, why not hand over my card? I still have other things to do." Potbelly hurriedly took the card and handed it back to Jack with both of his shaky, meaty hands. Although he knew that he was done for, he knew that if he dared to offend Jack any further, it might not end with his secrets being exposed to the board of directors of the bank. He might as well expose them to the public and he would end behind the bars. When his father called, he had told him that all the things that he'd done had been sent to all the members of the board. As a result, they were all blaming him for giving his son the post only for him to use it for his own benefits. And just like how his own father had placed him in that position, he took him down to make sure that the members of the board wouldn't want to take the shares in his hands and kick him out of the board of directors. Now, he didn't have a job that he could use to get the girls, just like how he was doing. He had always made it difficult for those that wanted to take the loans from the bank. Only after they gave him some benefits would he approve the loans. Jack received the card and looked at Denali, and the two of them walked out of the office under the stunned gazes of the observers. What Jack wanted was simple: to expose the secrets that Potbelly was hiding. The moment that Jack noticed that the two that were in the office were in some kind of exchange, he immediately knew that Potbelly there must have a few more secrets. As such, Jack expected Denali to look for those secrets and send them to the members of the board of directors. With her level in business management, she obviously knew what the right choice was. With Denali's level of hacking, she easily found the information about the members of the board of directors and sent them each a copy of the dark secrets of Potbelly. As to why he didn't expose the secret to the public, he knew that this would surely make a huge impact on the reputation of Flyers Bank. And he himself had seen how Heyman was. Heyman was also a branch manager, but he was an honest person. If the bank suffered, maybe Heyman's salary would be reduced. For his sake, Jack decided not to expose the secrets that would taint the reputation of the bank. At the end of the day, it was only one person that Jack had found. Had he found a few more, he surely wouldn't mind exposing the secret to the public. But the prerequisite for doing that was for the other party to offend him. Just like how Potbelly had made him wait for a whole half an hour and had thrown threats to his face. Furthermore, Jack didn't like that kind of behavior. As they left, Jack made a call. "Hello, Mr. Heyman, can you prepare an upgraded card for me? I want the platinum level. Oh, one more thing, I would like 2 cards that have access to the account. If possible, you can send them to be delivered in Venture City." "Okay, Mr. Jack. By the way, did you get the company?" Heyman asked. Although he was stunned by how fast Jack was upgrading his card, he was still enthusiastic considering the fact that Jack had remembered him. If he did the upgrade, he was going to be promoted for sure. After all, that indicated that he had the backing of a big shot. "Yeah, I'll have to thank you in advance. The trip to Venture City has given me more than I had expected. So, when I come back to Inchoate City, I'll treat you to a meal." Jack replied. "Ha ha ha, then I'm looking forward to that." Heyman replied after laughing. "Oh, by the way, can you do me a favor? I have a friend of mine in the city and she's having problems now that I'm away. I would like you to help me in ensuring her safety together with the company under her. Just ensure her safety till I come back at the end of this week," Jack said with concern on his face. For friendship, he didn't mind owing Heyman a favor. At the end of the day, Jack didn't think that Heyman would ask for more than what he should of the favor that Jack owed him. "Not a problem. Just give me her information." Heyman didn't mind it. Protecting someone in the small Inchoate city was nothing to him. Even the Dante family had to give him face, not to mention the others. Jack gave some of the basic details like the name of the company and where Celine was staying, which was obviously Glaze Hotel. After that, Jack then called Celine and informed her that he'd asked someone to ensure her safety till he came back. He wanted to deal with the person that tried causing trouble for her by himself. Issues like this was the reason as to why he had decided to form the private security team. This team would receive the body strengthening pill and this would make them stronger. Jack and Denali drove back to Cheetah Hotel. It was already about 20 minutes to the appointment time. At this moment, Jack looked at Denali and gave her his card. "You can purchase the shares of Brightway Medical Research Center. I need to use it as soon as possible. One more thing, buy everything that you need to use. No matter what it is, as long as the money can buy it, just do that." Denali nodded and took the card and headed back to the suite. On the other hand, since he was having an appointment with Tracy, he decided to book a VIP box where they could deal with the contracts. He had already booked a suite for a whole week. And his current balance was currently $111,297,570,000 after buying the car for Denali. With him staying in a presidential suite, a few $1,000s won't be hard for him to fork. Not long after he had booked the box, his phone rang. It was Tracy. She said that she had already arrived in Cheetah Hotel. So, Jack gave her the number of the box that he was in. Not long after, a lady wearing a black office suite and high heels walked in. She was a beauty of her own proportion. This made Jack question himself if every successful and hard-working woman was beautiful. Even if not now, at least during her youth. Jack had already ordered food to be served, and after Jack had gone through the transfer agreement, the food was served. The food that had been served was definitely a light one that was just suitable for breakfast. Since Tracy had left the capital earlier, around 3 in the morning, it was obvious that she was hungry. "Let's eat first. I'll sign the contract and talk about the changes that need to be made in the company after we're done," Jack said. Since she was hungry, Tracy agreed to Jack's suggestion and ate. It was only after she was full that she noticed that although Jack had started before her, he was still eating. At first, she simply thought that since Jack was a man, he ate more. But as time moved and Jack continued eating, she was surprised by his big appetite. In the end, she decided not to say a word, as although Jack was eating more food than she had expected, his table manners and movements still had a charm on them. After he was satisfied, Jack looked at the document that had been handed to him and finally put his signature on it. Then, they discussed the matter concerning the changes next. "I want to merge Amber Securities and Safety Enforcers into Good Vision Security Limited. Furthermore, it doesn't matter the amount of money that is required, I want everything to be upgraded. I don't want things to be taken slowly," Jack said. He wanted his empire to be built faster, and the foundation that he was creating had to be strong enough. Now that he had over $100 billion, there was no need for him to save it. He could as well use it so that he could earn more. Since he got the system, the area that he'd gotten the most income from was from betting. And now that he had to upgrade the system to level 2 to have the income from betting to be multiplied, he had to find another source. Only by investing could he gain even more money. After they had chatted, Jack informed her that he had a personal assistant that would be visiting the headquarters of Good Vision Security Limited to make changes if necessary. Furthermore, he told her that she would work alongside Ayush once the company had merged with the 2 middle-sized security companies. After that, Tracy decided to stay within the hotel for the day and leave in the evening. There was an airport here in Venture City, and as such, it wouldn't be hard for her to get back to the capital. Jack still had a few more things that he needed to take care of before going back to Inchoate City. After taking care of the loose ends in Inchoate City, he would head to the capital city of Ozima, Kond. Not long after Tracy left the box, Jack's phone received a new message. Upon checking it, he found that it was from the bank showing that he'd received money. He didn't need to ask where the money came from as the sender called not long after he received the message. "Hello, Mr. Jack, I hope you've received the message about the money that I sent over." Chapter 94, Requirements for the System Upgrade. "Hello, Mr. Jack, I hope you've received the message about the money that I sent over." Jack nodded his head. But when he remembered that Calvin couldn't see him, he replied, "Yes, I have received it." "Have you taken your share?" Jack wasn't sure how much the buildings, the cars and all the other things were worth. Although he could use the ones that the system had rewarded him with to calculate, he didn't have the time to do something insignificant as that. "Yes, I have already taken my share according to the agreement." 10%, not a single dollar more. Jack nodded, and at the same time, he didn't doubt anything that Calvin had said. But even if his thoughts were wrong, he didn't care if Calvin took a few $1,000,000 from the money that he was supposed to give to Jack. In any case, Jack had already gotten the benefits from the mansions and the villa. So, at this moment, he didn't care about them. The reason as to why he was selling them was simply because he didn't want to have so many useless assets. After chatting for a little while longer, Jack finally ended the call. He had received $412,364,700. This was after Calvin took over the 3 houses, villa, cars and other things like the laptops and so on. It was also at this moment that Jack remembered that he didn't have a house in Venture City. But after thinking for a moment, he thought that it wasn't necessary to have a house here anyway, as he won't be staying here for a long time. He shook his head and walked out of the private box and headed back to the suite. He found that Denali had already left. He assumed that she had gone to do shopping for all that she deemed necessary. In any case, Jack didn't mind that, as currently, there was something that he wanted to deal with. It was the issue concerning upgrading the system. He had postponed this issue since the previous day, and he thought that this would be a good time for him to look into it. He sat on his bed and asked, "What's up with this upgrade to level 2? Does that mean that the system is only at level 1? You got it right. Currently, the system is at level 1. You have to complete some things so that it can be upgraded. The first requirement would be that you must have $500 billion in your account." The first condition was something that Jack believed that he could achieve after some time. Although he could no longer earn that much from betting, he could still make investments. As long as he received $5 billion, he would be able to get the $500 billion once the multiplier effect was applied. Second, you must have at least 5 companies that are worth at least $500 billion each. Furthermore, you'll have to defeat at least 5 competitors of the 5 companies and make these 5 companies monopolies. Jack frowned for a moment. For him to take over 5 companies that had a net worth of at least $500 billion wasn't something that could easily be dealt with in a short time. But it wasn't impossible, considering that currently, he already had Good Vision Security Limited that was worth at least $300 billion. Although it would take a long time, he was sure that he would succeed. As for making them monopolies in the industry in the country, that was something that he could do with the advantage that he was having currently. Now that this was a condition that had to be fulfilled, he decided that he would simply integrate the companies into Jackson Enterprise after he made them monopolies. The final condition is that you must have a girlfriend. Jack, what's up with the system now? What's wrong with its program? Maybe there's a bug that made it say this as a condition for upgrading it? Jack questioned himself doubtfully before finally asking, "Can you please repeat the last condition that must be fulfilled?" The host, Jackson Alfonso, must have a girlfriend. Jack was left speechless once again. There was not a problem with the previous prompt? What the heck with this absurd condition of him having a girlfriend for the system to be upgraded? Wasn't him not having a girlfriend have no effect to the system? How come it now mentioned this as a condition? Jack took a deep breath and asked, "Angel, can the system be a little serious here?" We're talking about serious matters, but here, the system is joking. The system isn't joking at all. That is a condition that you'll have to fulfill before the system can be upgraded. In other words, unless all the conditions that have been stated are fulfilled, there will be no way that the system will be upgraded. Jack took a deep breath as he tried to think of a reason as to why the system would set such a condition. The business and the balance he could understand because the system had its influence in them. Now, the girlfriend, if he wasn't wrong, she was supposed to be his own, not the system's. Furthermore, he wasn't going to tell anyone about the system. Or the system wanted to give him a green hat by marrying his girlfriend? This seemed to be the case as otherwise. Why would it request for such a thing? But, thinking that the system was just a program, how could it marry a human? But, it had the power to bring someone from all over wherever Denali was from. Maybe, could it be that it would turn his girlfriend into a program and marry her? With the system's power to manipulate others' minds, it won't be hard for it to make his girlfriend believe that she loved the system more than she did him. Why would there be comparisons? The system would simply erase her memories about him from her mind and the problem would get solved, right? As Jack's thoughts continued running wild, Angel couldn't stand it anymore. Angel could know what Jack was thinking and as a result, it could get all the strange ideas and thoughts that were running in his mind at that time. Can you stop having that kind of imagination? The reason for that being a condition for the upgrade of the system is simply due to the new feature of the system that can affect those close to you. At level 2, it can affect your other half. At level 3, it can affect the other members of your family, your parents and siblings. It seems that I was right. It will affect my girlfriend by changing her memories and making her its. I thought that was all. It turns out that it will also try having a family of its own by taking my family to its side. It wasn't that Jack's IQ was low. It was just that, when the system that came out of the blue planet suddenly brings up the conditions that you need to fulfill, and no matter how you think, the condition doesn't seem to be related to the system at all, one had to be cautious. Angel was silent for a moment, maybe due to how ridiculous Jack's thoughts became. Perhaps it wondered what happened to Jack, who was normal not long ago, to suddenly become retarded. It was only after a moment that it spoke. You can decide on whether to do that or not. It's your choice at the end of the day. The system will not force you to upgrade it. It was only when Jack heard these words that his speculations stopped. He remembered that if the system really wanted, it could have easily made him do whatever it wanted. It had the power to control and manipulate others' memories. As long as it changed his memories and made him think that it was his mission to serve the system, there was nothing that it couldn't do through him. After calming down, Jack decided to put this matter aside for now. He would think about that once he'd finished the other two conditions. On the other hand, things concerning a girlfriend was something that reminded him of the envelope that his mother had left him a few years ago. She had told him to only open it if he wanted to have a family of his own, a girlfriend. He wasn't sure what was inside the envelope, but from the weight and size, he could guess that there were a few documents inside. As for what was recorded inside them, he had no idea. Now that this issue was out of the way, Jack decided to deal with another matter. System, can I get the reward I got yesterday? It is inside a drawer of the cabinet that is beside your bed. Jack, can't you just make it appear in front of me? Jack complained in his heart, but still, he went to the drawer of the cabinet that was beside his bed and opened it. He found that there were several A4 papers that were pinned together. He took them out and observed them. The words and font of the words on the papers looked no different from the ones that were printed from the printing machines that he knew. He read it and found that indeed, just as it was to he expected, there was the procedure of making the pill, the instruments and ingredients. Everything was well described in such a way that Jack could even try imagining how the process would be like. After reading through it all, he knew that he would have to wait for Brightway Medical Research Center to be bought over before he could start trying the production of the pill. Denali will have to use her special skill to identify those that could be trusted in the institute. And only those that were selected by her would have the task of production of the pills handed to them. As for whether the production would be successful, he had no doubt about what the system had offered. There was no need for him to do so as he had already experienced the power of the system. Jack was just about to do something else when there was a knock at the door. He could already tell that it wasn't Denali because she didn't need to knock to enter. So, he left the bedroom and headed towards the door. When he opened it, he found that Wendy was the one that had knocked. He was curious about what she wanted. Yes? Chapter 95, Invitation. Yes? I wonder if you're free. I would like to invite you to go around with us. Wendy asked a little nervously. Although she didn't have faith that Jack would accept her invitation, she still came forward and invited him. The closer he was to her, the better her chances. She wasn't ready to give up on him no matter how long it was going to take. But of course she had to hurry things up before her grandfather announced the issue about her engagement. She didn't want her grandfather to force Jack to marry her. Since he valued his reputation and she said that she loved Jack, to add to the fact that they had already signed an agreement with Jack's father, it was obvious that Alton wouldn't let this slide. Jack hadn't expected to be invited by her. All the same, he thought that they weren't enemies at all. So, in the end, the only thing that Jack didn't agree to was the fact that she was claiming to be his fiancée. Jack thought for a moment. He still had a lot of things to do during this week. He had just acquired a few companies that had yet to be stabilized, like the grocery department in Inchoate City. What's more, he wanted to start the branches of the grocery department here in Venture City. With the protection of the Amber and safety enforcers, he was sure the incident like the one that George had told him wouldn't be happening. Seeing that Jack wasn't replying to her, Wendy decided to give a concession and invite him when he was free instead of him making time for their plans. She was just about to speak when Jack beat her to it. Not this week. I'm busy with something. And after that, I'm supposed to go back to Inchoate City to deal with a few loose ends. After that, I believe that I'll be free for a while before getting busy in the capital. Jack had decided that it wouldn't be bad if he could tour his own country. After all, he had only visited 3 cities now, and this wasn't something to be proud of. He was a patriotic citizen, and as such, he could promote his country by visiting different parts of the country to spend and earn money. Wendy was surprised by Jack's busy schedule. But what surprised her the most was that Jack had agreed to her invitation. Although it wasn't this week, at least he had agreed and not refused. Now that she had a chance to get closer to him, she was going to grab it firmly. Okay then. I'll make the necessary arrangements. You'll have to tell me the specific day that you'll be free so that we can plan on where to go. Wendy smiled brightly as she said these words. Although she wasn't as beautiful as Celine, her beauty rating was still in the 90s. As such, even Jack had to appreciate that she was indeed a beauty. Furthermore, her attitude wasn't bad. It was just that Jack wasn't ready to have a fiancé out of nowhere. Additionally, if he hadn't had the strange feelings towards Celine since the first time that they had met, Jack wouldn't have minded entertaining the thought of having her as his girl. Although he had to take a look at the envelope first, he didn't believe that there was anything that would prevent him from getting a certain girl as his girlfriend, right? After all, inside the envelope, there was a document. And although he wasn't sure about the contents of the document, he still was sure that it wouldn't be stopping him from falling in love. Okay then. I'll let you know 2 days in advance. Jack nodded. Wendy happily left. Although she wanted to invite him to lunch, she decided against it. Jack had already stated that he was busy. As such, she didn't wish to make him regret accepting the invitation. Inchoate City, happy residential area. Reuben looked at Kevin and said, "There was some kind of interference on our plan. Heyman has made a move and suppressed all the gangsters that we sent." Kevin's expression shifted greatly. He had been making plans, but they kept on failing due to the interference of some unrelated people. Why would Heyman make a move? He has always minded his own business. Why would he try making a move at such a time? Kevin asked with a frown. I'm not sure about that. But today, just about 2 hours ago, some of his men suddenly made a move and chased all the members of the gang that we sent. The Jerks brothers gang is not a match for Heyman, and the moment that his men made a move, they had to retreat. Reuben replied helplessly. Damn it! Just what's wrong with this Heyman? Won't he just mind his own business and forget about others? Why is he meddling in one of our most important plans? Kevin was frustrated. He walked towards his seat and sat down. Click. 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 Picking up a ball pen, he began playing with it. He pressed it, and as time passed, his speed shot upwards. And not long after, the pen was broken as he had applied too much strength. Seeing this scene, although Reuben had something that he wanted to say, he decided to keep it to himself and wait till Kevin relaxed. He knew Kevin since he was young and had watched him grow. And pressing the ball pen was one of his characteristics that showed that he was in a foul mood. At that time, as long as something unpleasant was said to him, it was likely that he would end up making decisions without thinking them through. After a long while, Kevin's anger had calmed down and he began thinking normally again. I think that the reason as to why Heyman is interfering might be because he doesn't know that we're the ones behind the Jerk brothers' recent movements. Or maybe, that young girl Celine might have requested for his help. Reuben paused for a moment and observed Kevin's expression. Upon seeing that he was listening, he continued. And if that's so, I'm sure that Heyman wouldn't mind giving a hand because Flyers Bank is big. If the Gravy family owed him a favor, he might even be promoted to the regional director of the bank once they put in a good word for him. Kevin considered how things were and thought that Reuben's deductions shouldn't be too far off if they weren't on spot. But what he didn't want was to have other people knowing that they were the ones that were making the move. Although they were the ones that had paid the Jerk brothers gang to be ready to cause trouble for Celine when they gave them the green light, they had never met with the leader of the gang by themselves. They had always interacted on the phone. As a gang in a small city, it was obvious that they needed much money. So, it was simple for them to pay them a few $1,000s to make them do what they wanted. These guys didn't know about Celine's real identity as they hadn't attended the banquet that she'd set up. That banquet was only for people with great power. Kevin was just about to reply when Reuben said something that made him frown. Frank has been making moves towards Jack's grocery stores. If I'm not wrong, he should be able to reduce their sales by the end of next week. Reuben said. This idiot. I told him that we should first investigate everything about him, but he still made a move this early in when we haven't confirmed the information that we received. If it happens that Jack is from Alfonso family, we will be in trouble before our current plan even succeeds. Kevin spoke as anger began surfacing on his face. I think we should help him. If it was true that Jack was from the Alfonso family, he would have surely reacted to the provocation by now. But all this while, other than his subordinates, he had never shown up in the stores. Reuben said. Do you have a plan? Kevin asked. He too had to accept that it was true. Any member of the Alfonso family was arrogant, and thus, if he was, he would have already reacted to this. It can be considered as one. If we make sure that we pressure him so much, I'm sure that we can force him to sell the business overlord building to us. What's more, we can get it at a lower price. I'm sure that he'll have to accept that because he must have spent all of his fortune to buy that building. If we block his business, considering that most of the things that the groceries deal with are perishable, he would surely suffer great losses. Reuben explained. Indeed, just like Reuben had said, Kevin found that this idea was indeed doable and it would be much easier than making a move on Celine. Although Celine's family didn't have that much influence in the city, if they really decided to make a move, he was sure that even their family couldn't stand it. It was exactly this reason that made him move cautiously and hide in the dark while attacking. In this way, even if the plan failed, he was sure that Celine won't be able to know that they were the ones behind everything. Then let's do that as soon as possible. That grocery of his has only occupied one floor in the entire building. This is a waste. Kevin agreed. Chapter 96, Buying Grocery Stores Again. When Wendy got back to the room that she was staying with Angie, she was in high spirits. She had left hurriedly without saying where she was going. And seeing her like this, Angie was curious about what she had gone to do. "What made you so happy?" Angie asked curiously. It was only when Angie asked this question that Wendy realized that she had been smiling all this while. She blushed for a moment before regaining her composure. "What are you talking about?" She pretended not to know what Angie was talking about. "Young lady, there's nothing that you can hide from me. You left hurriedly not long ago. Now you're coming back, you're so happy as if you want to compete with the moon with that shiny face of yours," Angie said as she looked at Wendy. It was obvious that she was not willing to give up unless Wendy told her their truth. Wendy took a deep breath and said, "Well, I just went over to invite Jack to come with us for our trip to visit the beautiful scenes around the Western Province. And you know what? He agreed," Wendy said enthusiastically. She and Angie had been friends since they were children. And now that they had grown up, they still talked to each other and shared their own secrets. Although not all the secrets were said, at least 99% of them were shared. "Yeah, he's your fiancé and he should agree. That's the least that he should do. After all, in at most a year and 2 months, you two are going to get married. But he still is taking women in the hotel. Have you asked him about that lady?" Angie wasn't as enthusiastic as Wendy when she heard that Jack had agreed to going on a trip to enjoy themselves. Her impression of Jack had dropped last night when she saw Denali entering Jack's suite. Furthermore, even though the two of them were engaged, she had never seen Jack being intimate with Wendy. At the mention of Jack sharing his suite with another woman, Wendy's previous excited expression disappeared. She too wanted to know who that lady was, but Jack hadn't told her a word when she asked him this morning. Now that Angie had reminded her about it, she couldn't be happy any longer. She had to invite him while he himself invited another lady. This kind of treatment was by far different from how Jack treated the other lady with. But she couldn't blame him as he was not the one that had initiated the engagement. Furthermore, the engagement was planned by her family and his, without even he himself knowing about it. But, although she didn't know what kind of relationship Jack had with that woman, she had faith in herself that she would manage to make him love her just like she loved him. Leave that aside for now. Can we talk about something else? I'm sure that the lady was there for business issues. Wendy tried shifting the topic. Angie, on the other hand, wasn't ready to let this go. She looked at Wendy with disbelief and a tinge of anger as she reprimanded her. "Wake up, girl. You can't just believe in such a thing. What kind of business is discussed at night in a hotel? At least they can take a private box to talk about business." Wendy couldn't find words to refute what Angie had said. But all the same, what could she do? Jack had already told her to give up on him and he wasn't the one that was insisting on her being his fiancée. So, he wasn't restricted to not getting together with other women because of an engagement that he knew nothing about, with a girl that he didn't know. "I'll make sure that he forgets about all the other women," Wendy said. "It doesn't matter if you're not courageous enough to face him and tell him what you have in your heart. Since you can't do that, your sister, will do that for you. I want to see him behave like that in our presence again." Angie thought to herself as she swore to herself to make Jack responsible for his fiancée. Not knowing that there were some plans that were being cooked up somewhere, Jack went back into the suite and took the laptop that Denali had left on the table. He decided to go through all this information as it consisted of all the information that he had to know as the owner of the few companies under him. Furthermore, there were other pieces of information about the employees that were under him. Jack could tell that this information was gotten by Denali after a night of hacking. The information was well organized in folders. There were different categories that made it easy for Jack to look for the information that he wanted. There was a folder of each company that was under him. Additionally, inside each of these folders, there were different folders that had the information about the employees, current activities, expenditure, cooperation with other companies, competitors, and so on. Currently, Jack wanted to make Good Vision Security Limited a monopoly in the security sector. Currently, it was worth at least $300 billion. As such, he thought that it would be easy for him to develop it, unlike the others that were valued lower than it. He could do one thing at a time. After making sure that one was stable and had really monopolized the market, he could then focus on another, as he would be sure that the earnings from this side would be enough to enable him to develop another industry. In the medicine research, he was sure that the strength pill would be enough to boost the value of the Brightway Medical Research Center. And if he was lucky to get another recipe for a drug to a certain disease, he was sure that he would be able to easily make the research center reach the top. As for the competition, he was sure that they couldn't compete with the recipes that came from the system. It took a few hours for Jack to read through all the files that he thought were important. With his ability to remember, he didn't forget about what he'd read easily. Although there were a few parts that he might need to confirm, those were the parts that he didn't focus in remembering them. He was done now and could be considered to know a few things about his companies. This was surely enough for him to make decisions for the company. What's more, he could see that there were indeed several changes that needed to be made. It seemed that Denali had worked overnight or had woken up earlier in the morning to search for the information about them. After all, even the incidents that these people could consider hidden, Jack found them and had read through them. In other words, most of the secrets that they were hiding had already been exposed to him. And, once he goes to the company, he would make the necessary changes. For his foundation, he thought that the 5 companies that would monopolize the market in the country would be good enough. He took a deep breath as he looked at the screen of the phone that had lit up. It was someone who he had no contact information calling him. He picked it up without hesitation. In these few days after getting the system, he had gotten used to getting calls from strangers. "Hello, who am I speaking to?" Jack asked. "Hello, I believe that I'm speaking to Mr. Jackson?" A male voice asked. "Yes, you are." Jack responded calmly. "Mr. Jackson, I've received the information that you have acquired Serenity Residential Area. I'm Moses Cabanzo, the one that's in charge of the buildings. I don't know if you have any instructions for me?" Jack was surprised that this was the manager of the residential area. He had just read the information about him on the laptop not long ago. According to the information that he'd read, he knew that Moses was a straightforward and honest person. But there was still a problem. The one that was helping him, the assistant manager, Sean Zhu, was corrupt. He had been using the residential area for his own benefits all this while. That was an example of the change that Jack wanted to make. "Oh, not at all. But soon, I'll send someone there to look at the residential area. If there are any changes that need to be made will be decided at that time," Jack stated. "Okay then, Mr. Jackson," Moses replied before ending the call. At this moment, since he had already picked the phone, Jack decided to call another person. "Hello, Mr. Calvin, I would like to ask another favor of you." "Just like always, Mr. Jack, I'll help as long as I have the ability to do that. But I can't promise anything." Calvin's calm reply came. Jack nodded as he thought of the other party's carefulness. But it was to be expected. He wasn't omnipotent in that he could promise anything. After all, there were things that were beyond him. "It's not that difficult, really. All I want is your assistance in getting grocery stores in Venture City. As long as the owner is willing to sell it, then I'm willing to buy it. Of course, you'll get benefits as well. How about the usual 10%? You'll get 10% of the total cost of purchasing the stores." Jack threw the benefit. "Okay then, Mr. Jack. This can be completed within 2 days. Stores aren't that hard to acquire as long as one has money," Calvin replied. "But I would like the best stores in the city. I don't want the smaller ones," Jack reminded. "All right, no problem at all." Jack then called Grace. "Hello, Mr. Jack," Grace greeted. "Hello, Grace, how are things there?" Jack asked. "Things are doing okay for now at least. But there are a few gangsters who seem to be intent on making trouble for our stores," Grace replied. "Oh, I see. George had already informed me about that. Worry not, when I get back, I'll deal with them. But for now, I would like you to stabilize everything there as soon as possible before getting to Venture City. Here, I'm also buying a few grocery stores. They will be undergoing the renovation within next week and I hope that you can pay them a visit. Okay, boss. I'll make sure to handle things here as fast as possible. Grace replied confidently. Okay then. But make sure that you're not saving money. I gave you the money so that you can spend. Jack reminded before hanging up the call. Chapter 97, Private Security Team. The following day, Jack woke up earlier than usual. But surprisingly, he found that Denali had already gotten up. He wondered how it was that she worked so hard and that she was even embarrassing him. Although she was his subordinate, he still was too lazy to deal with most of the things and delegated the duties to her. Remembering about what the system had told him about her, Jack was curious about her family. After all, the system said that she had her own family in life. It was only now that he remembered that he hadn't talked to her about her salary. How bad of him. She was working so hard but had not asked about her salary. Jack was sure that had it not been for the fact that she was loyal to him, she would have already asked how much he was willing to pay her. It was just that the current Denali believed that Jack would pay her the salary on time without her needing to ask. But maybe her belief could be answered at this moment as Jack asked, Denali, can you tell me about yourself? Jack knew nothing other than the fact that she was chosen from all the women called Denali in the world. Anything else, he knew nothing at all. Denali was surprised that Jack was curious about her background. In front of others, she was always cold. But in front of Jack, she warmed up. Actually, I'm from here in Azima. But I'm from the northern province. I'm from a family of 4, that consists of my father, mother, me and my little brother who's still in high school at this time. Denali began. It turned out that she was from the northern province of Azima country. Jack hadn't expected that she was a fellow citizen. When the system said that she was chosen from all the women in the world with the name Denali, he had expected that she was a foreigner. But maybe his country was so good in that it could produce a talent like Denali who was the best in the world and could match him when it came to business. Her family wasn't that rich. According to what she remembered, at the age of 5, she was taken away by a secret organization that she didn't know its name till this moment, and received special training. When her course ended, she was already 20 years old. Although she had undergone a lot of harsh training when it came to combat, she had used some special kind of oil that they provided her with to make sure that she maintained her feminine features. So, although she had great strength, her body wasn't as muscular as how men were. Instead, she still looked as delicate as a normal woman would. But, if a person dared to try her, she could erupt with great strength and that she could shock them. When she completed her course, she was assigned to come and work under Jack. He was the one that was going to be in charge of her. When Jack heard all of this, he was amazed by the system's ability in fabricating stories that seemed true. What an ability! No wonder it could manipulate the memories of others and they would notice anything at all. Now that he got to know about her background that seemed not to be that big, Jack decided not to give her a fixed salary. For the work that she was doing, she deserved more than that. For your salary, I'll give you the other card that will be sent here alongside mine. In other words, you'll have access to the same account as me. So, you can use the money there if there's anything that you'll need to spend on back at home. Jack stated simply. Ah, master, I don't think that I can accept that. You can just give me a fixed amount of income. A few $1,000s a month will be enough. Denali shook her head vehemently as she refused what Jack had said. If you see me as your master, you better do that. If there's a problem that needs money, just spend. And if there's another problem that you can't handle using money, just use the influence of the companies under me. Jack stated all this with a tone that didn't accept refusal. When they were alone, Denali called him master. But in front of others, she referred to him as boss. This was so that some people with wild imaginations wouldn't start thinking about some things that are inappropriate for children. Remember, you're my second in command. In other words, other than me, only you can make decisions on all the companies and businesses that are under me. Observing her expression, Jack continued. If you don't use the money and be so much reserved, I will take it as if you don't take me as your master. Jack concluded. Jack's words were to the point. With Denali's loyalty towards him, she was even willing to die as long as he gave the order. And as long as he became serious and asked her to do something, she would do it without hesitation. Now that Jack was serious about what he'd said, she hurriedly agreed. Okay, master, I'll do as you say. Jack's last words were the ones that had frightened Denali the most. Since she was completely loyal to him, it was to the level that was just below worshipping him. So, she wouldn't want to disobey Jack, and neither would she want Jack to leave her. After breakfast, Denali and Jack both went to safety enforcers to select the 20 men that would be part of the private security team, PST. Although he wasn't the one that was going to make a decision on the ones to be selected, he was still curious about how she was going to make the selection. In other words, he was curious about how her loyalty simulation worked. Not long after, they arrived. Jack could see that there were several changes that had taken place in the previous 2 days. It seemed that Maxwell was serious when it came to spending money. The previous night, Jack had informed Maxwell to organize the members of the company that worked as security guards or bodyguards and weren't on duty during the day to go to the company today. Of course, that only applied to those that were present in Venture City. So, when he and Denali arrived, they were welcomed by Maxwell before he led them towards the training grounds. Here, Jack could see that there were several improvements that had been made so far. And he could see that there were new equipment that could be used for training. According to Maxwell, they had already ordered for a few more, but they had yet to be delivered. Jack knew that it might take a long time to deliver some of the equipment as they were shipped from abroad. Although he was going to merge Safety Enforcers and Amber Securities into Good Vision Security Limited, that didn't mean that they could simply ignore this place. This could as well be used as a provincial headquarters of the company. When they arrived at the training grounds, they found that about 100 men were lining up in 5 rows, their backs straight. Just from this, Jack could tell that they had high discipline. Although it couldn't compare to the military discipline, he was sure that it was good enough for now. Boss, I selected the best 100 from those that were available at this time, Maxwell said from the side. Jack took a glance at them before nodding in acknowledgement of Maxwell's decision. He then motioned for Denali to go forward and select the 20 men. Maxwell was curious about Denali. Jack didn't hide it from him, as Denali could be considered as his superior, so he introduced her. That's Denali, she's my personal assistant. In case she comes here, you can treat her just like how you would me. Maxwell was surprised by how high Jack viewed Denali. But looking at her temperament and the way that she was confident even when looking at the group of muscular men, he couldn't help but be impressed by her. Had she been replaced by another lady, he was sure that she might have been flustered standing in front of these men. Most of them had seen blood and had fought vicious fights. So, there was a certain aura that they emitted that would most likely scare away some of the weak-willed men, let alone ladies. I got it, boss. Maxwell nodded. He had come to respect Jack's way of handling things. Although he was young, he didn't dare to underestimate him. Denali walked around for about 10 minutes while observing the 20 men in each of the 5 rows. Then, she began pointing at the men, one after the other. As she pointed at them, they took a step forward and awaited further instructions. Surprisingly, it seemed that Jack had judged too early. There were 2 ladies in this group of 98 men, and they happened to be selected by Denali. Jack knew that it didn't matter about the gender of the person. As long as one had the strength, even if she was a woman, she could do some things that even other men couldn't do. As of now, Jack didn't care about strength. He cared about loyalty the most. As for strength, they would gain as long as they received the pills. Jack had observed all along, but he couldn't see how Denali judged the loyalty of the ones that she'd selected. But all the same, he was impressed because as he looked at the ones that had been chosen by her, he could tell from their expressions that they seemed to be straight. But all the same, he knew that appearances could sometimes be a facade. So, if not for Denali, he wouldn't have trusted these 20. After dismissing the others, including Maxwell, Jack looked at the 20 people that had remained here and spoke seriously. I plan to have you guys form a private security team. This team will only consist of the 20 of you. There will be resources that would be used by you during training. Furthermore, you'll get more benefits. Chapter 98, Ongoing Undercurrents. The 20 people in front of Jack were surprised that Jack wanted them to form a private team. And although they were surprised, they found nothing strange about that. At the end of the day, they had already seen teams being formed several times. More so, they had seen this when they were going to guard a special person or they were going to guard a certain rich man's building. All the same, they were excited to be chosen. They themselves didn't know the prerequisites of being chosen as there were no tests. Denali had simply pointed them out after looking at them for a moment. Do you agree to that? If not, you can say it earlier so that we can find a replacement for you as early as now. Jack asked again to confirm. We agree. The 20 men and women shouted in response. Jack nodded. He then said, as a private team, you'll be having special training. But that will have to wait till next month before you start gaining some of the benefits. There are some that you'll receive from this moment, but there are others that will have to wait for a moment. I'm going to give you a first mission. On Sunday, I would like you all to be in Inchoate City. There's a group of gangsters that are causing trouble there. I would like you to deal with them. Jack stated as he looked at the group. Upon seeing their confused gazes towards him, he knew what they were thinking and said, Don't take this team like the ones that you had formed before. The team that has been formed today won't be broken. Although there might be other teams, this team will exist. In other words, the private security teams that are formed won't be doing the contracted work like the ones that the previous teams had been doing. You'll be doing the missions that you'll be assigned at a particular time. Your salary will stay the same even if you don't have a mission during that month. But there will be bonuses after the completion of each mission. Jack continued. The group once again became ecstatic. From Jack's words, they were going to have guaranteed payment. And, from the example of the mission that Jack had given them, they could already tell that it wasn't as dangerous as the one that would involve guns. Okay then. You'll be heading towards Inchoate City tomorrow. The mission will be carried out on the following day. So, I hope that you can use this day to get prepared. After the mission, you can stay there till the preparations for the special training are completed. Jack continued. He talked about a few more things and about his plans for this security team. As for the name of the team as well as their captain, Jack told them to decide it among themselves. Since he was done with this, Jack left with Denali. They parted after reaching the hotel. Jack had already received the call from Brightway Medical Research Center to confirm the successful purchase of the remaining shares. All that was left was to sign the contract. It was for that reason that he was supposed to go back to Inchoate City as early as possible before rushing to the central province. As for Denali, she was going to the headquarters of Good Vision Security Limited to prepare for the merging process. But that was just the preparations, as the issue concerning the pills will come first. After the body-strengthening pills were produced successfully, the merging would start under the supervision of Denali. If possible, Jack would have left Venture City on this day. But he had to stay as by the following day, Calvin would be done with purchasing the grocery stores. There was no way that he could simply leave without making sure that everything was in position. Crystal City, Alfonso Mansion. Dalton, where's Jack? You were supposed to have brought him here by now. Victor frowned as he looked at Dalton, who was standing in front of him. Father, there seems to be something that I didn't expect. Jack seems to have left Inchoate City. As to where he is, we absolutely don't know where he went, as he didn't tell his guards when he left and when he would come back. Dalton replied. He was working hard to make sure that he found Jack. But no matter how hard he tried, he simply couldn't find any information about where he went. Jack had left on the Eurocopter of his. Although Grace, Celine and Heyman knew that Jack had gone to Venture City, Dalton had no idea that they knew, and neither did he know that they knew Jack. So what are you going to do? You already signed an agreement with Master Alton. So, there's no way that you can get out of this. If Jack happens not to be found, our family will be done for. Victor said as anger began surfacing. He was even doubting himself if he had really made the right decision by making Dalton the family head. After all, he had simply expelled someone from the family without even consulting him. What's even more demeaning of his choice was the fact that the one that he'd expelled from the family was his own son. Although he was trying to save his position, he just made things worse. Although none of them had expected that there was someone that would come to ask for Jack to marry into their family, at least Victor thought that Dalton's decision this time was really unwise. If it was just a matter of expelling Jack from the family, he himself, being that he never liked Jack, he would have already expelled him from the family. But, all this while, it wasn't that he was afraid of something, it was just that, at the end of the day, no matter if they expelled Jack or not, one thing won't change, and that was the fact that he had the blood of the Alfonsos running deep inside his veins. I'm still trying to know of his whereabouts. I'm using all the power that I have to know. Furthermore, I'm investigating his actions at the time that he was still in Inchoate City. I'm sure that I can get a clue. Dalton replied confidently. Look here, Dalton, no matter what, you have to make sure that Jack is brought here. You know, the engagement hasn't been made official yet. Who knows when Master Alton will decide to make it official? It might be tomorrow, or maybe next week. So, Jack has to get found and brought here, the earlier the better. Victor instructed before leaving. Dalton thought for a moment and decided to make a call. Hello, Kevin, I would like to request for a favor from you. Inside the Alfonso mansion, inside one of the bedrooms. Brenda sat in front of a mirror as she looked at her reflection. Currently, she was wearing a V-neck beige dress. Her eyes were sharp, all the previous hints of playfulness couldn't be found. I have to do something to make sure that Jack doesn't get married to that family. If he marries that lady, I'm sure that he's going to take revenge for all that has happened to him all this while. She thought to herself. She looked at her nails that were clean but a little long. After playing with them for a while, she continued thinking, I can't go to Inchoate City do the bet. Although off-track racers seems to only ban a person from racing competition, they would definitely make my life hard. At the end of the day, I don't participate in racing. Otherwise, the punishment for breaking my end of the bet wouldn't be anything to me. She pursed her lips as she began thinking of what to do next. Steve has already began his punishment. No matter where he goes, it's like trouble is following him. His life hasn't been easy in these past few days. Since I cannot go there, I can as well send someone else, someone that will be able to deal with Jack. Even if I have to kill him to make sure that he doesn't come back here, I'll do it. Maybe he can't remember anything at this moment. But, once he remembers anything related to his mother, I'm sure that chaos are going to erupt here. And, things will get worse the moment that he gains a powerful backing. Although it may be cruel, little brother, you'll have to forgive me this time. I absolutely cannot allow you to come back here, and neither can I allow you to get married to someone with a big background. The only solution now seems to be eliminating you from this world. Jack had no idea that there were several plans that were aimed at him at this moment. They were either to force him back to where he hated the most, or to erase his existence from this world. And all of this came from a single reason, the engagement between him and Wendy that was planned by Alton but suggested by Wendy. If Jack knew about this and knew about the reason for being targeted, he would surely make sure to keep his distance from Wendy. Although she did nothing intentionally, it was just that if she was closer to him, she became his calamity magnate. On Saturday, after making sure that everything in the grocery stores that he just bought were in position and could easily be taken over by Grace when she came here, Jack was finally ready to leave Venture City. He headed to where he had landed before when he came here with Gabriel Waddy. He had left that guy alone all this while and he wasn't sure how he was doing. As a pilot, it was a sure bet that he would be someone that enjoyed flying. For him to stay in a single place for almost a whole week, it would surely be torturous for him. In any case, Jack wasn't worried that Gabriel would lack accommodation and so on. At the end of the day, he had already made the required payment to have him by his side as a pilot for a whole year. When he arrived there, he found that Gabriel was already waiting for him. He had already informed him that they were leaving on this day. As for the group of 20 that had formed the private security team, they had left early in the morning. They had chartered several helicopters to take them there. After he got in, he was greeted by Eco. He had actually missed this AI as he hadn't heard it for about 4 days already. Let's get going. I still have to move around for a long time. Jack shook his head as he thought about how several of the companies were in different cities. This made him move around so much. You got it, boss. Gabriel replied before he flew the Eurocopter out of Venture City. Chapter 99, Dealing with the Gang, 1. A few hours later, Jack finally arrived in Inchoate City. He looked at the serene environment of the Prince and Princess Palace and couldn't help but feel nostalgic. Being far from the busy streets and roads, the environment here was relaxing. He could stay here without having to worry about the noise or meeting with a situation like the one that he'd when he met with Garpy. As the Eurocopter landed on the roof of the garage, Jack looked at Gabriel and said, "Next week, we will be heading to the Central Province. But of course, we won't be using the Eurocopter." Gabriel was surprised when he heard this. He looked at Jack with no words to say as he wondered just how rich Jack really was. Although he himself was hired at a price of over 1 billion, that was for a whole year. One had to remember that the 1 billion wasn't his income. But it included the insurance of the plane that he would be flying, added together with the price of fuel for the plane. On the other hand, Jack had bought the Eurocopter that was worth at least $150 million. Although it couldn't be said to be much, as compared to the price that Jack had paid to have him as his pilot, it was high when spent on a plane. "We'll be using the plane at an airport?" Gabriel asked after a moment. "You can say something like that. But we will get to Venture City with the Eurocopter. I have a private business jet in the Venture Abroad Airport, that has a branch in the Venture City." Jack replied as he removed the headsets. Now that the Eurocopter was no longer making so much noise, they could communicate freely without using the headset. "A private jet? It has been a while since I flew such a plane." Gabriel muttered with a smile. He had been flying helicopters the most as they were the ones that were mostly used by those that paid for 1 day or 2 days trip. As for those that had their own private jets, why would they go through the issue of hiring a temporary pilot? They had their own professional pilots. Although Jack had stated that they were going to use the private jet, Gabriel didn't think much of it. After all, how big could a private jet that Jack owned be? After getting out of the garage, Jack met with the guards. They had heard when the Eurocopter came in. So, some of the guards came to welcome Jack back. "How have things been here when I was away?" Jack asked. "There were no problems at all. It's just that there were a few people who came here to ask for you." The leader of the guards, whose name was Bob, replied. Jack frowned a little when he heard that there was someone that came here looking for him. According to what he knew, there shouldn't be anyone that was supposed to come looking for him here. Sabrina, who was in charge of Homescope Properties Limited, wasn't someone that was related to Jack for her to come looking for him. As for George, the guards knew him all too well for them not to mention his name if he came looking for him. And apart from those two, Evans from the Bentley shop knew here. But the guards knew him. If either of the three found out that he wasn't there, they would simply call him as they both had his contact number. "Do you know any of those that came looking for me?" Jack asked after thinking for a while. None of them ever mentioned who they were. There were 4 of them and neither of them had the intention of revealing their identity, claiming that you're the only one that was qualified to know them. Bob replied. He too had found that there had to be something fishy going on. As a result, he had made sure that the security was increased. He could somehow relate this to Dalton as he was the only one that had the intention of looking for Jack. If Bob could, then Jack could also relate this incident to Dalton. Narrowing his eyes, he looked at Bob and said, "Don't allow anyone in here without confirming with me. That's unless the person is one of those that have been here before." Yes, boss. Bob nodded before leaving with the other 3 guards that he'd come with. Jack, on the other hand, welcomed Gabriel into the Prince mansion. And for the first time since he came here, Gabriel appreciated the scenery. He had to accept that it was true that this place was good for retreat after working hard for years. But it was just that it was located in the city. If it was on a hill somewhere, it would have been good. And it would have been better if there were a few birds that made the atmosphere even more lively in the forest around the mansion. After Gabriel sat, Jack prepared a meal for him. Although he wasn't the best cook, his food was still good as he had been cooking for himself ever since his mother passed away if he didn't eat outside. Jack asked Gabriel to select a room for himself. The top floor only had his master bedroom, the swimming pool, and a few other things that could make him relax well. So, the room that Gabriel chose was on a lower floor. You can leave this place and go around the city. I'll call you if there's a need for that. There's a basement where you can entertain yourself. And one more thing, if you're going out, you can just pick one of the cars out there. The keys are there, Jack said as he pointed at a small table that was close to the door. There were several keys there. So, all that Gabriel had to do was to pick one of the keys, go out and press it. The one that will respond would be the one that he would use. Gabriel wasn't polite at all as he accepted Jack's arrangement. He was now Jack's subordinate till a year ended from now. In other words, till next summer, he would be working for Jack. The following day, Jack looked at the group of 20 in front of him. Currently, they were wearing the special uniforms that safety enforcers provided for those that were in the private teams. You know what to do, right? Jack asked. Yes, boss. They both replied at the same time. Okay then. Let's get going. Jack stated as he got into his Bentley Continental GT. The others took other 5 Bentley Bentegas and drove behind Jack. On the way, Jack took out his phone and made a call. Hello, Jack. Celine's voice reached his ears. For some reason, he let out a sigh of relief when he heard her. He smiled as he asked, "How have you been? Any problems till now?" Although he had asked Heyman to help him on taking care of Celine, he still had to confirm with her. Yes, thanks for your help. Although the gangsters are still present, they have maintained their distance and don't dare to approach. Celine replied. Jack was finally relieved. He smiled and said, "No need to worry about them. I'm in the city now. So, you can count on me to deal with them." You're already back? How come you didn't tell me? Celine asked in surprise. Well, I told you that I would be back by the end of the week. Jack stated. But today is the first day of the week. Celine said. I came back yesterday. Jack's smile expanded as he said this. Well, I guess you really fulfill your promises. But, you can at least tell me so that I can wish you a safe trip. Celine continued. I will make sure to tell you next time then. Jack reassured. Okay then, I'm starting with some of those members of the gang that are causing trouble for my stores before reaching your place. Jack stated. Be careful. And after that, the conversation between the two of them ended. Jackson Enterprise Grocery Department, Yellow Street. The grocery store here looked absolutely different from the dirty buildings that surrounded it. The front and the sides of the store were well cleaned, maintaining the high hygiene that was required for those that dealt with consumables. Currently, instead of the usual busy scene where customers entered and exited the store, the area around the store was completely isolated, with only a few people in green uniforms standing in front of the store, looking helpless. These were the staff members that had been hired by Agnes. They had been working well in this place, but things suddenly became bad when the gangsters began causing trouble for them. They had threatened and chased away any customer that dared to come to the store to buy any groceries. As a well-known gang in Yellow Street, the Jerks Brothers gang had a bad reputation and was feared by most of the residents here. So, the moment that they stated that nobody was allowed to buy anything in the grocery store, nobody dared to come forward. And to make sure that nobody disobeyed them, they stationed a few of their gangsters here to keep watch. At this time, George came to this store. He was in charge of delivery, and as a result, he wasn't someone that stayed in a single place. As he drove the Bentley Bentayga SUV to the parking lot of the store, he shook his head as he looked at the desolate situation of the store. Although he knew who was behind this and could have dealt with it, it was just that the period that he had made a bet with Ismael hadn't ended. As a result, he couldn't use his family influence to suppress them. Just as he got out of the car, he saw a few men with tattoos walking towards him with steel rods, pipes and baseball bats. There was no need for him to ask what they were doing here, as he knew that they were the ones that were causing trouble here. "Kid, are you the one that's in charge of the store?" One of the men with a bald head stepped forward as he asked. "What's wrong with that? You better stop causing trouble here or it won't end well with you." George looked at him gloomily as he stated. The bald head didn't think much of George's threat. He knocked the car with his steel rod as he said, "Jackson Enterprise, not a good name. I can tell that this person is new in Inchoate City. So, it's obvious that he doesn't have much influence here." He ignored George's angry gaze as he continued, "So, I would like to give you a good advice. You better close this store of yours. Otherwise, you're going to suffer bigger losses once everything inside the store expires or they are no longer fresh. In any case, we're not leaving this place before this store closes down." George wanted to reply, but it seemed that he didn't need to do that. He saw the familiar Bentley Continental GT heading his way and smiled. "You think so? I will advise you to leave in the next 5 seconds or you'll end up in deep hot soup." Chapter 100, Dealing with the Gang, 2, You think so? I will advise you to leave in the next 5 seconds or you'll end up in deep hot soup. Baldhead didn't understand why George would say that they would be in deep hot soup. They were members of a gang that was well known in the city. They had spread their roots to almost each part of the city, Yellow Street being amongst them. According to what they knew, in this mission, they were supported by a certain big family. As for which one it was, they weren't sure, as only those in the upper echelons of the gang knew. Even so, he wondered what had given George, who was almost helpless not long ago, the courage to say those words with a smile. Was he trying to bluff his way out of the situation by boasting a big background? The more that Baldhead and the others that had come with him thought about it, they thought that it was true that George might be trying to threaten them. Baldhead scoffed at George as he said with a contemptuous smile, I would like to see what kind of hot soup you're talking about. You think that you can frighten us by using such tricks? We're members of the Jerks Brothers gang and there are only a few things that can make us retreat." George's smile broadened as he said, "Then I guess that is going to make you retreat, right?" As he said these words, he pointed at the Bentley that was arriving. Baldhead and the others turned around and looked at the Bentley that was coming their way. From the way that it was, they could already tell that it was worth at least $1 million. But even so what if that person had a car that was worth $1 million? In their eyes, this was nothing as compared to the one that had given them the mission. Just a single person cannot dash. His words were forced to stop as just behind the Bentley Continental GT, 5 Bentley Bentayga SUVs followed. And from their appearance and paint, they could see that they looked just like the one that George was driving. Even idiots could tell at a glance that the cars that were coming were from the same group as George's. They knew that there were several other stores like this one in the city. As such, they had spread their men all over, trying to make sure that the business was not running as much as possible. As they watched in surprise, Jack's Bentley came and stopped next to George's Bentayga. As for the other 5 Bentaygas, they blocked the exit. And immediately after that, 20 people hurriedly got out of the cars with batons in their hands. Here, there were only a group of 9 gangsters. So, when facing the 20 that had surrounded them, they immediately became flustered as their previous smug smiles completely disappeared. All that was left was panic in their eyes. The door of the Continental GT opened and Jack, who was wearing casual clothes, alighted. Even though his clothes were casual, they just couldn't hide his amazing physique as well as his charm. George strode forward and greeted as he patted Jack's shoulder. "Boss, you're finally here. I was wondering when you were going to arrive. If you had been late, these idiots would have caused us losses." Jack smiled in return to George's greeting. He himself was already angry with this group that was causing trouble here. The previous night, he had only received $9 million, and this was after the multiplier was applied. Grace had already informed him during the day, and he decided to deal with this on this day, as he had told the group that he'd come with from Venture City that the mission would be carried out on this day. The previous day was Saturday, a day that business was supposed to bloom. But the business was so bad in that he made losses of hundreds of millions. So, he had to deal with this as soon as possible. He looked at Bald Head and strode towards him. Upon seeing Jack approaching, the bald head that had just lost his voice immediately began talking. "You better not make things difficult for us, or our boss won't let you go. I think that you're mistaken. I don't plan on letting any of you go. You've caused me losses worth hundreds of millions by blocking my business," Jack stated coldly as he continued approaching Bald Head. Jack's words made the crowd flabbergasted. Hundreds of millions? From grocery stores? Can you stop exaggerating too much? Of course, they didn't know that Jack could earn up to 200 million or more on such a day as long as the multiplier effect was applied. But the previous day, he only made 9 million instead. That's a loss of over $100 million. In any case, he wasn't going to talk about the system to anyone. But they at least had to know that they had caused him great losses and they had to pay for that. "You won't let us off? Do you know who our boss is?" The bald head threatened. "I don't know him, but I would like to know him." "And, do you know me?" Jack asked as a cold smile formed on his lips. "Eh?" Bald Head was obviously not expecting that Jack wouldn't get frightened by his threat. What's more, he was right, they too didn't know Jack and neither did they know his abilities. But in any case, he was just a newcomer to the city. A dragon cannot beat a snake in its own home ground, right? Thinking about this, Bald Head pointed his steel rod at Jack and said, "It doesn't matter who you're. But at the end of the day, what I'm sure is that you are going to get into bigger trouble than this as long as you make a move on us. I would like to see that trouble," Jack said before waving his hand. "Beat them up until they can't walk. Just make sure not to break their bones." With Jack's order, the 20 members of PST made their move. They were all trained, even if it was only for a short period of time. So, their movements were swift and decisive. On the other hand, other than being at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, the gangsters were just a group of people who suppressed the weak while fearing the strong. They mainly depended on their numbers to suppress others and not their skills. So, they were beaten up in no time. With the electric current of the batons, they were immobilized after a few minutes of beating. Those that were observing were both amazed and excited upon seeing this scene. Nobody loved these bullies as they had made their lives hard in the streets. So, they would be happy when they saw that someone was going against them. The cries of the gangsters as they were beaten up were like music to the ears of the bystanders. After seeing that they had been beaten well, Jack took a step forward as he motioned for the 20 to stop. He squatted and looked at Bald Head with an amusing expression on his face. "You've been beaten up. But I can't see the trouble that you mentioned," Jack said. Bald Head wailed on the ground. Although their bones were not broken, who said that their limbs couldn't be dislocated? So, the pain that they were going through at this moment was intense. Jack shook his head and searched Bald Head's pocket and took out a phone. Surprisingly, it wasn't a smartphone, it was a buttons phone. He shook his head and scrolled through the contact list present in the phone. And not long after, he found a contact that said that this guy was a gangster. It was saved as Big Brother 3. With the gang being called the Jerks Brothers Gang, Jack could already tell that there might be several brothers amongst the top gangsters of the gang. He made a call, ignoring the cries and shouts of Bald Head. "What's wrong, Baldy? Have they closed the store already?" A thick and deep voice came through. "What closing of stores? I have something to discuss with you. I don't know if you have the guts to let me know where you are now?" Jack sneered as he asked. There was silence for a moment before Brother 3 spoke. "You're the owner of the stores? Seems like I'm talking with someone that has some brains after all." Jack replied. Humph, maybe you don't know your place. Opening a few stores made you so smug? I'm at the old warehouse that belonged to Dizza. If you have the guts, you can come here. It will be good if we can directly deal with you and stop wasting much time blocking the store's entrances. Brother 3 said. Jack smiled and said, not a problem at all. I'll be there on around 30 minutes. It will be good if you bring all of your brothers there. After all, it's good to deal with all of you in a single swoop. After that, Jack ended the call. He looked at George and said, you can take care of things here in the other stores with their help. I'll be back in a while. Without giving George a chance to reply, Jack got into the Bentley Continental GT and drove towards the west outskirts of the city.